All right, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the delay, but life happens. But we have a quorum and we're ready to start. I will call the Board of Adjustment meeting of February 21st, 2024 to order. It is 6:45. Uh, Can everyone please stand and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Our flag is over here. Ms. Montestein, if you could lead us
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. You may sit. May we have a roll call, please?
Chairwoman Rosalind Phillip,
Here.
Vice Chair Michael McDermott, Board Member Jeff Mondesir,
Here.
Board Member Blythe Pierre Louis,
Here.
Board Member Evan Shields,
Here.
Board Member Marlene Monesteem.
here.
Okay, thank you. And with that being said, before we start, we'd like to have the announcement read to the public so they could understand what will be taking place this evening.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is an announcement concerning summary of quasi-judicial procedures. These rules apply to applications on specific parcels of land, like zoning map amendments, special exceptions, variances, and conditional use requests. The board will sit like a court, hence the term quasi-judicial, reviewing the facts presented at the hearing, applying the adopted rules as explained by staff in the staff report and verbally. Board members can make site visits but must disclose the evidence upon which they intend to rely from that visit. Board members will disclose at the beginning of the hearing whether they have had communications with individuals on behalf of the applicant or otherwise, including who the communication was with and what the topic of discussion was. All persons intending to speak to the board will be sworn by the clerk. The staff will make a presentation and the board may ask questions. The applicant will make a presentation, including expert witnesses, if any, and the board may ask questions. When the public hearing is open, the public can make comments on the application, limited to 2 minutes each. Citizen testimony must be fact-based, not opinion. The board may ask questions, and the applicant's attorney, if any, may ask questions in cross-examination. Members of the public can decline to be cross-examined. The board deliberates based upon the evidence presented. The board's decision must be based on competent substantial evidence, meaning based on the record, staff presentations, expert presentations, and fact-based comments by citizens according to the standards for approval set forth in the city code. And the board may approve, deny, or continue the item. Now, I understand a substantial number of emailed comments have been transmitted to the board. So since the letters and emails are not competent substantial evidence, for example, not sworn testimony subject to cross-examination, the board's decision cannot be based on what is contained in the letters or emails, but they can be used to identify issues and help identify sources of information that do contain competent substantial evidence upon which a decision can be based. So lastly, let me make sure I've got, okay. Lastly, we ask each of you to treat this proceeding with respect and proper decorum, no calling out, interrupting speakers, or disrupting the proceeding. Please give this proceeding the same dignity and respect as if you were in court. Disruptions are prohibited and enforceable pursuant to the city code. Please also silence your cell phones. Thank you.
Thank you. And because this is a quasi-judicial procedure, anyone who will be speaking on the items tonight, for or against, it doesn't matter, would need to take an oath which would be administered. So,
And we'll do that now. So please stand and raise your right hand if you intend on speaking to the board, including staff.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony and evidence that you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. Do you have any amendments to the agenda?
Madam Chair, at this time, staff would like to recommend that you continue item V0124, V0224, and SE0124. The reason for the first continuance of V0124 is understanding that the City Council will be acting as the appeals board, and this item that is before you is similar. So in order to give the council the ability to hear the request and make the decision, and then you guys hear it, we feel like is more appropriate. And the other two items are for Get Smart Kids. We have some parking considerations that we have to work out, and that's why we're asking for that to be continued as well.
Okay.
Madam Chair, may I?
We have not opened public first, we'd like to hear from staff.
I gather Mr. Gasant wants to make a procedural point at this point. Is that correct?
Sure, I just want to make it clear that we would be objecting to any potential continuance of our item. I just want to put that for the record.
Okay. And
So staff has just recommended that all three items on the agenda be continued. In order to have that happen for any of these items, a motion of the board would be appropriate.
and
Just for the record, the two items, V0224 and SE0224, are unopposed. Get Smart Kids Academy is in favor of continuing their item as well.
okay. So that's why no one's here. Okay.
And then for further clarification, you're continuing it to the next scheduled meeting?
Yes, we would like it continued to the March 20th meeting, please.
So those two individuals are not here. Okay. Well, what say you? Discussion from the board?
Please remind me, what are the codes of those particular items again?
The V0224 and SE0124, this is the child care center.
Okay,
They've got parking issues and some special exception, as is, it's an educational.
okay.
Now, they're not here tonight, so I guess they know that their items will be continued.
Okay, given
So-
that they're not here tonight and they're requesting that it be continued, I move that we continue those items for the next meeting.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay. And is it just those two items, Mr.?
Yes.
Okay. Then those two items, we can vote on it? All in favor of continuing VO224 and SC0124?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now, VO124. Mr. Shields?
That was it?
Hmm?
That was it?
That was it? So it is the board's decision to move with it tonight? Okay. And does the applicant understand the opposition or what the city is saying
Oh,
in terms of your items?
the applicant fully understands what the city is saying regarding its item. We just don't agree with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Hurd?
I don't think he heard you.
Do we need a vote?
No, you do not.
Okay. All right, folks.
Will we continue with the agenda, approval of minutes?
Just that one item on the agenda.
Right.
Okay, so, any communication, I'm sorry. I'm totally lost. Approval of our last meeting of January 17th?
Point of clarification, do you mean approval? Are you
Of our
asking
minutes.
for a minute, a motion to approve
Motion to
minutes?
approve,
Okay,
yes,
so
thank
moved.
you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any communications? All right,
I would disclose that I did meet
Well-
with the.
We'll do the
When-
disclosures in a minute.
Okay.
when we get to the item.
Okay.
We have no continued petition, so we'll start with our new petition, which is V-01-24, variance to the maximum allowed height of 115 in the BZ zoning district to a height of 238.04 inches, 12000 North Bay Shore Drive. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mawuzi Watson, zoning manager here at the City of North Miami. Oh, sorry,
We're
my
going to
bad.
do disclosures first. So now, at this point, we should do board disclosures.
There you go. Thanks for the reminder. Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, I met with the attorney representing the client and also attended the community meeting that they had, I believe it was sometime last month.
Okay, thank you.
No-
Other than the emails that I've already furnished, nothing further.
Okay. I have attended the meeting. I've spoken on the phone with Mr. William. And then I've had a conversation with staff. So,
I had no conversation with the applicant and I did not attend the community meeting.
I have had conversation with the applicant, their attorney, Mr. Barreto, who has provided some items both for the similar item as well as a letter that I believe he's presented to us this evening on this item, as well as members of the Mariners Bay Condo Association, as well as Keystone Point Neighborhood Association.
and thanks for the reminder. I did receive all the emails, I'm sure as you did, but I finally spoke, I think, one other person was Patricia. I'm sorry if I don't remember, but she is a tenant at that, at the Mariners. Okay.
And for this complete disclosure, staff and council did have meetings with each of the board members as briefings. Thank you.
Hello again, Mawuzi Watson, zoning manager. Welcome. Tonight, for your consideration, is a variance to increase the maximum allowed height in the BZ zone. This project is located at 12000 North Bayshore Drive. The request is to allow a maximum height of 238 feet, 4 inches in the BZ zone. Currently, the maximum permitted height is 115 feet. Despite staff's recommendation for denial for the Continuum project, the applicant, Mr. Pedro Casant, desires to proceed with the public hearing. Staff's denial, it centers around the use of the BOA to make policy decisions regarding height. Typically, this kind of decision is made by the Planning Commission and then the City Council. The Board of Adjustment has the powers to hear and decide special exceptions, to hear and decide variances to the LDRs, and to authorize variances to the LDRs or flood damage prevention articles. To authorize a variance, an applicant needs to meet 4 of the 6 criteria, and according to staff's analysis, which I'll get into later, this project met none of them. The project is located, as you can see, in the yellow rectangular area. And I wanted to, at this time, point out another project that was approved by this board in October. Last October, Mr. Casant brought a similar variance before this august body. It was for the Alta Bayshore project located at 11950 North Bayshore Drive. Here, a height of 203 feet, 10 inches was approved and requested and approved. This decision is being appealed by Mr. Hernando Barreto, and the city did join as a co-applicant. This item will be heard next week, Tuesday. So you can see that the proposed project is surrounded by multifamily units, single-family homes, and the intercoastal. This is the proposed site plan. It's kind of hard to see, but this is just the footprint of the building. And although these were inadvertently omitted from the packet, this is the elevation. This is what it would look like from the east elevation. And the building would span a maximum of 238 feet, 4 inches. This is a larger image of the east elevation. This is the north elevation, the west elevation, and the south elevation. And then just to communicate, how this building will look like in context, these are the renderings as provided by the applicant. This is the entrance, the east elevation. So to get down to the analysis, as previously stated, staff's analysis garnered that this project met none of the variance criteria. Specifically, point number 2, the applicant says that this situation is unique. However, in October, you guys approved a similar project for the height. Specifically, it was for 203 feet, 10 inches. So understanding that happened in October, coming back before the board in February, it's not unique. You're doing it again. It seems to be a systematic approach of using the BOA as a way to make policy decisions instead of going to the council to subvert the policy decision makers.
Mawuzi,
Yes, sir.
would you please go through the staff report and state each
I was going to.
criteria and each analysis?
No problem. All right, so the first. So the first point is special conditions and circumstances exist which are particular to the land structure or building involved, which are not applicable to other land structures or buildings in the same zoning district. That's no. The unusual circumstance or condition necessitating the variance requests are presented in the neighborhood and are not unique to the property. We say no to that. Unusual circumstances or conditions necessitating a variance request does not exist here. In October, a similar variance was approved at 1950 North Bayshore Drive. This variance was granted a height of 203 feet, 10 inches, where 115 feet is permitted. The approval of Alta Bayshore height deviation contradicts the idea that these conditions are unique. Therefore, staff is requesting that a text amendment be pursued as the appropriate mechanism to achieve the desired height. The third criteria, that the requested variance maintains the basic intent and purpose of the subject regulations, particularly as it affects the stability and the appearance of the neighborhood, and that's a no. There's another multifamily building in the BZ, the Majorca Tower, which stands at 169 feet, and although that's there, this is a non-conforming structure. If the council, when they established the BZ zone, wanted to establish a higher height, they would have done that then, instead of leaving Majorca Tower as a non-conforming building. Again, staff feels that the appropriate mechanism for this kind of policy change is a text amendment to the comprehensive plan and to the land development regulations. The next standard is the literal interpretation of provisions of these LDRs would deprive the applicant of the rights commonly enjoyed by properties in the same zoning district under the terms of these LDRs. And that again is no. We did not believe that that met that criteria. A variance is a mechanism used to mitigate hardships. And here, there is no hardship. Economic considerations are not considered as part of our evaluation for a hardship. Equally important, because the property is irregularly shaped or addressed by two frontages, does not constitute grounds to grant a variance. The next point, the variance requested is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, structure, or building, and that is also no. And the last point is the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of these LDRs, and as such, the variance would not be injurious to the area involved. And this is no, and again, if the council or the community wanted to have a higher height when they established the BZ zone, the community would have done that. But they chose to establish a height of 115 feet. So based on that analysis, staff recommends denial of this project as proposed.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, staff would like to reserve additional time for rebuttal if needed.
Please. Applicant. Name and address, please.
Absolutely. Pedro Gassan of Holland and Knight with offices at 701 Brickell Avenue. I will put a note that I will be, I'm going to object to the extent that staff is seeking to rebut our application, as it's our application that we're submitting. Staff does a typical recommendation. That's typically not how the process goes about. And so I'm voicing my objection because this procedural mechanism is a bit unusual. And I voiced that objection previously at another hearing because it is unusual for staff to have a rebuttal when it is not the applicant.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Hurd.
I've been practicing land use law in South Florida for over 40 years. It is not so unusual for staff to rebut. I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we'll talk about that as it comes up, and I'll specifically cite the aspects of it, but it's typically the applicant. Well, staff gives us presentation, the applicant gives us presentation, the residents come in, and then the applicant provides us rebuttal, and it comes before the board. I'm going to leave it at that, and we can address that when it comes up, when staff seems to want to provide an appropriate rebuttal.
And maybe they're using the wrong word, Mr. Cassan. It may not be a rebuttal, because I think us up here might have questions for them, and that might be clarifications.
Okay.
So let's not use that term.
And I agree with you, Madam Chair. This evening, I am joined by my colleagues, Alessandria San Romain and Mishkael Setut, also of Holland and Knight. And I'm also joined by representatives of 12,000 Property Owner, which is the developer of this property. Representatives that include Alexandra Eichner, David Fishman, and William Wallace IV. And we're here, as noted by Mawuzi, to request one variance pursuant to your code for height. But unlike what Ms. Watson referenced, we're going to tell you how we meet every criteria of your code. We're going to go one by one to show you why we meet the criteria, why we show the evidence that demonstrates that we've met it, and to demonstrate why it would be appropriate to approve our application tonight. There are essentially three core things that I want you to remember as part of my presentations. I like to do this in order to crystallize the core points. The first is that irregularly shaped parcels under Florida law are entitled to variances. Number two, our request will sustain and support resiliency. And third, the approval of this variance will create unparalleled economic benefits to the city. Next slide. Now, one of the points that I want to make is a point that's actually very important from a paradigmatic standpoint, to take a look at what your code actually says regarding variances. Now, staff has talked about specifically and solely undue hardships, but under the city's code, you don't just approve variances for undue hardships, you approve variances for practical difficulties. So I'm going to reference your attention to section 3-601, and it specifically states, the purpose of this division is to establish a procedure for reviewing and granting variances from the literal terms of these LDRs where there are practical difficulties or unnecessary and undue hardships. So in this context, I could give you an apple, practical difficulties, or I could give you an orange, undue hardships. Staff's entire analysis on this is focused solely on the idea that we haven't provided or demonstrated undue hardships. And although we don't have any requirement to do it, we do believe that based off of our site, our analysis, and our property, that we are demonstrating both a practical difficulty and undue hardship. Next slide, please. The code is pretty simple when it comes to this. It has 6 criteria, and it essentially establishes that all we have to do is show 4 out of the 6 in order to be entitled to a variance under your code. Now, as I noted earlier, I'm going to go one by one to show how we meet the requirements of each of the criteria of your code and to demonstrate how we satisfy it. Next slide. But before I do so, I want to give you some context with respect to our site. I want to give you some perspective as to where we're located. This property is located south of Northeast 123rd Street on the east side of Bayshore Drive. It is approximately 4.3 acres, and the site provides a unique opportunity for us to leverage bay views. And it is in this context that we're going to address one of the first items with respect to the variances. Now, one of the things that we've done as part of our presentation tonight is not only are we going to show you each criterion, but we've bolded and underlined the specific language that we think is important as part of the criteria. So we're going to go and we're going to read it together. Number 1, special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are not applicable to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same zoning district. Next slide, please. Now, one of the first aspects of our site that I want to highlight is the fact that it is an irregular shape. You can see the curvilinear feature of the shape of our site from this slide. And under Florida law, irregularly shaped parcels are entitled to variances. But in addition to that, one aspect that is peculiar to our land is that approximately 1 acre of our property is underwater. That's 1 acre that we own that we cannot build on. If there was ever a practical difficulty, building on water would be it. Now, this is the same criterion, but what we've done is bolded and underlined additional language within this criteria. Again, special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building. So it's not just limited to the land. I can identify, I can reference, and I can talk about structures on the site that make it important for us to be able to be entitled to this variance. Next slide. The first thing I want to highlight is that we are increasing the seawall that is on our property by 2 feet. We are going to enhance the seawall from 6 feet to 8 feet. And what's important about this is that our seawall, unlike being on the eastern boundary line of our property, unlike being on the eastern property line of our property, is actually towards the middle, because the entirety of our site actually goes further east into the bay because we have submerged land as part of our property. Typically, seawalls are not in this location. And because we're increasing a seawall in the middle of our property, that is going to enhance the resiliency of not just our sites, of our site and the residents who live where we are, but for the residents who are west of us. It's going to help to provide for the resiliency for those residences as well. So under these circumstances, given the fact that we have an irregularly shaped parcel, that we have close to over an acre that is submerged that we cannot build on, we certainly meet the criterion of variance number 1, where it's limited to the aspects of the land and the structure. Next slide. Now, this is variance criterion number 2. We have bolded and underlined the pertinent provisions of this code provision. And I'm going to read it again with you. The unusual circumstances or conditions necessitating the variance request are present and in the neighborhood and are not unique to the property. Now, that phrase is actually very important because staff talked about the fact that it isn't unique to the property. So they concede that for this variance that it's not unique. And the code actually asks you to demonstrate an unusual circumstance of your site that is not unique to the property. Next slide, please. What is the unusual circumstance? The unusual circumstance in this instance is that we're sandwiched between two rights-of-way. You have a road on the east side, on the west side, and you have the bay on the west side. This is an unusual circumstance, but it's not unique to our property. You have a variety of properties all throughout this area that have that same dynamic. So under your code, under the way that your code is written, that's precisely what we are meant to show. We're not meant to show you something that's unique. Your code asks us to demonstrate something that's unusual, but not unique to our property, and we have done that as part of this criterion as well. Next slide. Now, you'll see that in its analysis of criterion number 2, staff, and I've been trying to wrap my head around it, is saying that it needs to be unique to the property, but that's not what your code says. And in this instance, we're saying that because it's not unique to the property, we are entitled to it and we satisfy the criteria of your code. Next slide. Variance criterion number 3, that the requested variance maintains the basic intent and purpose of the subject regulations, particularly as it affects the stability and appearance of the city. Essentially, this variance criterion boils down to whether the project maintains and enhances the appearance of the city. And when it comes to this specific project, we do exactly that because we're going to enhance this area, particularly as you view it from the bay. Next slide. This is our project. Our project is going to have beautiful architecture with clean lines to help enhance the views from the bay with respect to this property. Next slide. When you look at what we're doing, particularly on the eastern portion of our property, we're providing for enhanced landscaping and for luxurious design for a property along the bay. The contemporary modern architecture and the clean line form provides a substantially enhanced appearance in the area. Next slide, please. In addition, the design of the project contemplates curating core amenities that allow for the design features of the amenities to beautify the eastern portion of the city. Given these substantial enhancements, the only credible conclusion is that the development will enhance the appearance of the city, especially as it is seen from the bay. And therefore, based off of the wording and the plain language of criterion number 3, we meet that variance criterion. Variance criterion number 4. The literal interpretation of the provisions of these LDRs would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district under the terms of these LDRs. Variance item number 4 essentially boils down to whether the regulations as they exist today would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other property owners. Without a doubt, there are other properties within the same zoning district that are allowed to have a height that exceeds what the BZ provides, pursuant to the LDRs. Now, staff takes the position that because it's a legally non-conforming use, that it's somehow not to be recognized, but your land development regulations allow for that height because of the fact that it's legally non-conforming. And Majorca Towers itself exceeds the BZ zone. So you have a property that's in the same zoning district that has the ability to exceed the height requirements. And as Ms. Watson noted, there's another property that also has exceeded the height requirements under the BZ with respect to this area. Next slide, please. Let's go on to the next one. In addition, Bayview also exceeds the height of its zoning district with respect to the property, and it has a height that greatly exceeds what its zoning district provides. And so under this scenario, we also demonstrate that we meet variance criterion number 4. Now, one of the points that I want to make is that with 4, we would be able to satisfy it. But as I noted at the very outset, we want to be able to demonstrate that we meet each criterion of the code. We only have to demonstrate 4 criteria under the code to be entitled to a variance. Variance number 5. The variance requested is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of land, structure, or building. In this instance, in order to address resiliency issues and allow the reasonable use of the property, we are making a substantial investment along our seawall and are making commitments for substantial improvements to drainage within the site. But in addition, given the market that we are in with respect to insurance and construction costs, this development can only happen at a premier and luxury scale. Next slide. As we noted earlier, we are going to substantially improve our seawall. Essentially, we are investing to raise the seawall by 2 feet for a total of 8 feet for a 586 linear feet along the property. What that means is that we are essentially, to put it in perspective, we are going to raise the seawall to 8 feet for an area that essentially covers 2 football fields. 586 linear feet is what we're going to be doing in order to enhance the seawall for this site. But in addition to that, we are going to be required to provide drainage improvements for the area fronting our property. Because Mariners Bay was built in the 60s and 70s, one of the things that occurs is that when it rains, the water goes out into the road. One of the things that's going to happen as part of this redevelopment of the site is that we're going to have to invest to ensure that the drainage for our property is retained on site. We have to put those dollars in. We have to invest in those dollars in order to address the issues that are existing on the frontage of the road and with respect to our site, because the only reason why it drains onto Bayshore Drive today is because of the fact that the regulations that existed at the time of Mariners Bay did not require them to do that. Next slide. But in addition to that, constructing luxury condominiums require first-rate materials. And currently, the cost of construction has skyrocketed, and so too has the cost of insurance. The cost of insurance will reduce potential sales prices as sophisticated buyers will reduce how much they are willing to pay given the cost of insurance. But in addition to that, interest rates are at their highest level in 2 decades. As shown in this slide, interest rates have not been this high as high as they are today since December 2000. And as you can imagine, the higher borrowing costs are passed on to consumers who then reduce the price that they are willing to pay for units. Thus, the only way to get the type of pricing that will justify the development, the investment in the seawall, and drainage is to build a premier first-rate condominium, which is exactly what we're doing here. And when you take into account that approximately 1 acre of our land is underwater, it becomes clear that we need the height to justify development. Thus, criteria number 5 is satisfied. The final criterion essentially asks us whether the variance will be injurious to the area. And the answer here is a clear and emphatic no. We will not be injurious to the area, but we will benefit the general welfare as part of our project. Next slide. First, as part of this development, the developer is proposing for public access along the northern property line that provides for enhanced aesthetic along Biscayne Bay. Specifically, if you look at the right side of your screen, you'll see that green area. And what we're doing is providing for public access along that area so that the public will be able to view and enjoy the bay in that area. In addition, when you take into account that the site is immediately adjacent to Bill Lehman Park, it becomes even more apparent that the public welfare will be enhanced by the project, as the green area will be seen as an extension of the park by the public. Next slide. In addition, even before the buildings are built, the city, the county, and public schools will receive a substantial economic benefit from this project. As shown on this slide, before a single building is built on this property, $1.3 million will go to the city, $1.57 million will go to the county, and over $500,000 will go to the school board. That's over $3.3 million before any buildings are built on the site. Next slide, please. But even in addition to that, the economic impact from this development is staggering. Over a 5-year period, the city will receive over $20 million from this one project. Over a 10-year period, we'll receive over $40 million from this one project. And over a 20-year period, we'll receive over $102 million from one project in an area that is enhancing the views, enhancing the bays, and satisfy each criteria of your code. These dollars are all unrestricted dollars that the city will be able to use to enhance its roads, drainage, landscaping, and even transportation systems. When you take all of this into account, it is clear that we are in harmony with all of the criteria of the city's code. And therefore, we should be entitled to a variance with respect to this. Now, one of the things that my colleague will be passing out is a case I think that some of these board members are, I think all of the board members are familiar with, which is a case of Coral Gables v. Geary. And because you're familiar with it, I'm not going to belabor the issue. But this case stands for the proposition that irregularly shaped lots are entitled to variances under Florida law. And it particularly provides in a case where a height variance was being sought that the irregular shape of that lot entitled it to a variance. And this is just one of the quotes from this case, which says, "It is, of course, well recognized that an irregular shape or other peculiar physical characteristic of a particular parcel constitutes a classic hardship unique to an individual owner, which justifies and in such cases requires the granting of a variance." Next slide. And one of the aspects of this case that's important is that it doesn't matter whether the property owner knew of the irregular shape when they bought it. Under Florida law, that's not something that comes into the analysis. Even if a property owner knows that the site is irregular, they are still entitled to that variance. Next slide. So when you take all of this into account, the fact that 1 acre of our land is underwater, the fact that our land is irregularly shaped, the fact that we are in a scenario whereby we're providing for an enhancement of the views from the bay, and we're providing for significant economic benefits to the city while also meeting the criteria of the code, we believe that in this instance, this is entitled to an approval. Again, the entire analysis that has been done to date has been based on undue hardship. The items that we have talked about, the practical difficulties that result from the seawall enhancement, the fact that we have a portion of our site, a large portion of our site that's underwater, the fact that we are providing for significant economic benefits to the city entitles us to this variance request. We thank you for your time. We are here to answer any questions and would like to reserve some time for rebuttal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, with that being said, we will open public hearing. Comment. Please state your name and address and 2 minutes or you'll be cut off. I'm sorry.
Mrs. Rosalina, I sent a specific petition to allow me 15 minutes to present our case because there are special considerations. I am also the appellant in the case of 199. There is a lot of case law that has been misused by the applicant attorney. Then I need at least 15 minutes, and I send that request by email and letter to you, and I will appreciate that. It's up to this board to allow me that time in order to present my case.
While I understand, but I don't think I have that authority because then I would have to give 15 minutes to everyone else because you are considered part of the public. Am I right, Mr. Hurd? I'm sorry.
Thank you. It's within your discretion, and your decision to treat everybody equally is
Yeah, you
sound.
know how I feel about that. I want everyone to have the opportunity and, because I don't want it to be one against the other. So-
Also, the gentleman is not, to my knowledge, not an attorney.
I'm not.
Right, so not representing
Okay.
other people.
So please, try to do as much as you can within the 2 minutes.
Okay, but this is within your authority, and that has been happened before. Just for the record, that the people
Not
from
on this dais.
Okay, thank you. I will try my best. Thank you. As residents of North Miami, we oppose this request for variance. The main
Name and
reason for
address.
the opposition, excuse me,
I'm sorry.
I will start again, sorry. My name is Hernando Barreto, and I live in 11930 North Bay Shore in Mallorca Towers. And I am here to oppose this request for variance. The main reason for the opposition is that the applicant is misusing a variance procedure that was not intended to force zoning change. As per the expert opinion of Ralph Brooks and Henry Lee Morgenstern has mentioning, the reason or rationale behind the law allowing variances at all is that in some situations, the literal application of the zoning code will create such a hardship that is that it will not allow any use of certain parcels of property whatsoever. However, a variance is sometimes mistakenly believed to be simply a tool for allowing a more intense use that would otherwise be allowed. Boards of adjustment have sometimes been unclear on this distinction, granting variances as convenient expedient to avoiding the zoning and land development regulations. An applicant variance request must be reviewed on its own merits rather than on the basis of previously approved variance or pre-existing condition in the jurisdiction. Also, there is more case law, including the case of Metropolitan-Dade County versus Michael Betancourt, in which was said a variance should not be granted where the use to the authorized thereby will alter the essential character of the locality or interfere with the zoning
You
plan
got 2 minutes.
for the area. And with
2
rights,
minutes, sir.
excuse me,
You're at 2 minutes.
how much?
You're at 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andres Barreto, and I am the resident of 2177 Colonnade. I forget my address right now. I will continue. Or interfere with the zoning plan for the area with the rights of owners of the property, of other property, and a variance which permits a use not authorized by an existing zoning classification, fixed under a planned zoning of the area or neighborhood, generally is not justified unless the land cannot yield a reasonable return when used only for purposes authorized in its present zoning. As indicated in the previous point, the rules and case law have established that the applicant must demonstrate hardship to request a variance and that the burden to prove the existence of the required hardship and unique conditions is always on the applicant, as Gomez versus City of St. Petersburg. However, the applicant for this variance has neither demonstrated the hardship nor the variance because a lot of the benefits he sold you on can still be built with the current rules. And variance is required because there is no other practical way to develop the land at 12,000 North Bay Shore. North Miami City staff have recommended denial of the variance, concluding it fails to meet at least 4 of the 6 criteria. And it is still practical to build on the land as is, and it is still profitable to do so and to get all those benefits. The applicant was informed that there is a pending appeal on a previous variance case for the property at 1150 North Bay Shore Drive, but the applicant's attorney insisted that he has represented the 3 projects in the North Bay Shore corridor of less than a quarter mile, in which the developers are hoping to pack more than 420 condos, which would yield more than 1,000 more new cars, trying to use the variance procedure to force zoning change. That's all I have today.
I'm going to object to the testimony to the extent that he's providing for opinion and not fact-based testimony. Thank you.
If he's going to object, then we can object too.
Let the public continue.
I want to share that the attorney has presented opinion multiple times when he said
Okay,
this is
This
clear.
is not appropriate
No.
argument, so let's just move on, okay?
Good evening. My name is Laura Galliano, 12,000 North Bayshore Drive, president of Mariners Bay Condominiums. I'm here to ask for your vote in favor of the project, which is crucial not only for our condo unit owners, but the entire North Miami community. If this project does not proceed, Mariners faces imminent financial collapse, hence our decision to terminate the condo. Our operating accounts are critically low, under $50,000, barely meeting statutory requirements. We've been hit with a staggering 800% increase in insurance premiums, forcing us to impose a $3,000 a month HOA fee. This fee is a significant strain, especially for our fixed income residents. Moreover, we are facing a $3.4 million 40-year recertification project, which amounts to $100,000 per unit. Any delay in approval risks pushing Mariners Bay into receivership, leading to foreclosures, fire sales, and plummeting property values all around us. Please focus on the merits of the developer's application, and frankly, it would be unconscionable for this project to be treated differently than our neighbor Alta, who has no timeline and no residents, and they were approved. If this project does proceed, we are looking at a win-win. The developer has embraced smart, environmentally sensitive development, ensuring no adverse effects such as shadowing. They've put together a robust community benefits package and an injection of $4 million a year into city funds. This is a substantial increase compared to the current tax revenue from Mariners, which is roughly $250. The city budget is currently $208 million, yet a gap remains in funding critical city maintenance and resources. This project promises to bridge this gap. $20 million over 5 years, $43 million over a decade. I ask everyone in support of this project to stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Name and address?
Madam Chair, if I can just make a comment. If there are citizens who want to speak, but your presentation is essentially the same as has just been presented, either you don't need to speak, or if you can just say, I support the project as previously stated by the president of the association, that would be sufficient. Thank you.
Good evening, board. My name is Armando Soto, 2253 Bayview Lane. As the board convenes today to consider the future of North Miami, I'm here to present my perspective and opinion as a resident passionate about our city's growth and development. North Miami, despite its vast potential, has often been overshadowed by the expansion of other cities in Miami-Dade. I advocate for responsible growth that promises to enhance our community's economic vitality, livability, and sustainability. My support is for unity in our city and growth that is mindful of our past, such as the White House Inside development. The dilapidated building stands as the eastern gateway to North Miami, symbolizing our city's divisiveness. These experiences should guide us in ensuring that new projects benefit all residents, not just developers and their consultants, and it is also crucial for everyone to commit to moving the city forward once decisions are made, leading to the realization of these projects. Our city is at a crossroads, and the decision we make now will shape our future legacy. As the board deliberates on this proposal, I urge prioritization of progress that benefits our entire community, reinforcing our commitment to a future where North Miami thrives, inclusive of all who call it home. I believe one thing we can all agree on is that we stand united in our vision for North Miami that thrives, not just survives. Thank you for considering my perspective as we aim for a consensus that serves North Miami's best interest.
Hello, my name is Larry Zinn. I reside at 2142 Northeast 122nd Road. I'm a fourth-generation resident of Miami-Dade County. I was born here, went to school here. My 3 children go to school here. I'm a North Miami business owner and a homeowner directly down the street from the proposed development. As a resident of our beloved neighborhood, I am here today to address some pressing concerns that affect us all. In particular, our overall safety and the stress that the proposed additional density will put on our already failing infrastructure. Our streets are regularly used as a bypass for local traffic, posing a significant safety hazard to pedestrians, especially our children. The rampant issue of speeding exacerbates this danger, making it nearly impossible for us to walk our children's strollers or our dogs or for our kids to play outside without the fear of being struck. Now compound this with the prospect of construction-related vehicles and eventually hundreds more residents with the proposed variance, a recipe for disaster that we are vehemently opposed to. Furthermore, our once charming park has fallen into disrepair, neglected and poorly maintained. It's heartbreaking to see a space that should be a hub of community activity become dilapidated and unusable. And now the prospect of additional development looms over us, threatening to compound our existing drainage, power reliability, and already existing traffic woes. Let's be clear. While development may line the pockets of the few, it comes at the expense of the many, the homeowners who call this neighborhood home. Our safety should not be sacrificed for the sake of profit margins. We have come together and demand safer streets, well-maintained public spaces, and responsible development that considers the well-being of the community above all else. Together, we are here to make our voices heard and ensure that our neighborhood remains a place where families can thrive and feel secure. Thank you.
Good evening, Karen DeLeon, 1935 South Hibiscus Drive. I was here last month, and you all granted my neighbor a variance to extend his dock a few feet. Thank you. That's what I depend on you guys for. Those variances that are smaller in scale, as opposed to what is the equivalent of needing a supermajority from our city council. And that's what you guys are being asked to do right now. You are being asked to put a height that should be discussed in a larger forum. It needs no disrespect to you guys. As humans, I'm so appreciative of the work that you're doing, but I just don't think this is the right board for this to be going in front of. I think a loophole has been found, and it's been taken advantage of once already, which is an appeal, which is taxpayer dollars, taxpayers' time. Okay, it's already been taken care of once. Now we're on number 2. Quit your day jobs. In all due respect, and my heart goes out for the people that are in financial straits here, but they're not going to be living there, right? If every person who has a financial difficulty comes to you and says, I can't afford my mortgage anymore, I need to put a 10-story building on my space, what's the difference? So I respectfully ask you, please have this go the appropriate channels. This is not part of our master plan. It needs to go in front of our city council. It needs to have a supermajority vote in order to be passing. Thank you.
Hold up. My name is Hal Schoenfeld, 11930 North Bayshore Drive. All respect to the people at Mariner Bay. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And the developers, they're entitled to make money, and I respect that. My only question is, the original plan, they did a beautiful presentation a few weeks ago about a green building, and they're not going to build the maximum, as if they're doing the neighborhood the right thing. I'm not a lawyer, I don't know how that works, but it sounds like they changed it. The presentation said one thing, and then they said, no, we're not going to build the maximum, and then they asked for a variance. That was a little confusing. Maybe I misunderstand it, but it sounds like they made a change. The other thing is, just on a practical basis, what about the traffic? I was in Aventura the other day, and on 125th Street, ambulance screaming through the street, can't get through, people are on their phones doing their whatever they do, and what's the infrastructure? What's the plan? They build, rich people buy the apartments, they have 3 homes all over the world, and what happens when one of them has to get to the hospital? Oh, well, the roads, the city was supposed to put in the roads, so I guess they didn't do it. Just practically, I see this happen all the time. And Aventura, the guy's beeping his horn, and all I'm saying is, whatever's fair for everybody needs to live. But what happens if one of our families are in the ambulance? Sorry, we approved the project, your loved one has passed. And I just don't see, it sounds like Miami and all cities all over, they kind of look to the side and we'll worry about it later. And that's all, a matter of life or death for anybody. I don't see where that's being considered. There just has to be something in the middle for everybody. So we can live and get to the hospital, they can build their project, and there's infrastructure. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Andy Medina. I'm a resident of San Souci Estates. I am one of the single-family homes adjacent to the building. I feel if anybody's going to be affected by this building, it's me and my family. Whether you believe it or not, I am pro this building. I understand what this building can bring to my community. Every time it rains, our streets are flooded. Staring at Mariners Bay, it's dilapidated. There's concrete falling off of the structure. It needs to be fixed. The park next to Mariners Bay, my children are not allowed to go to. There's been several shootings in the past year, and there's nothing better to see than a nice new building next to my house. Now, I know they're going to add safety, security, they're going to improve the roads, But more importantly, when you're coming across the bridge coming into North Miami, you're going to be welcomed by a beautiful building. I moved to North Miami 5 years ago because I see what this city has. I had faith in the city. I bought homes here. I built my business here. I want to see the city grow. And I know that you need money to do it. You can't fix all the roads because you don't have the money. My kids can't go to the public schools here because they're not safe. The police take 7-8 minutes to come because they're busy somewhere else. And how do you fix that? A good establishment like yourself with some money to be able to spend where you need. So I am a proponent of the building. I do believe that this is going to bring what our neighborhood needs. Now, looking and hearing the arguments about cars, I'd say 80% of the traffic we feel on our streets already is like my co-neighbor said, people cutting through our neighbor to go over the bridge to Bayshore Harbor, Powell Harbor, Surfside. These cities are not going to stop building. So I don't think that one building on our side of the fence is going to affect this traffic. You live in Miami, it's a lot of traffic. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Cesarano. I live in San Souci, 2138 Northeast 122nd Road. Listen, I had a whole speech to be written here, read here, but I mean, at the end of the day, when I've been listening to this hearing as it is, you know, and you had to look at the evidence, I think the staff has actually put forward the most evidence, and the attorney's put through his opinion that he was hired to write by the developer seeking to get a variance for a larger building to make more profit. Now, they can simply build the building. They can build the building at the right height. They can sell those units. It all makes sense, but they want to max out their revenue. That's all what it comes down to. They're not looking out for the community. They're not looking out for the association that they bought out, and a lot of those people who live there didn't want to leave. I've talked to them. And, you know, we're at a situation where I think right is right, and right is no variance. That's it. I don't have to read my speech because the evidence is right here. Thank you.
Next.
Oh, excuse me for giving you my back. Hi, my name is Alex Berchakos, 11930 North Bayshore Drive, which is Mallorca Towers. I love skyscrapers. I love art. I love architecture. I love structural engineering. I think the building is beautiful, but there's a time and space for everything, and that's not the time and that's not the space. I think that's in black and white, and we can leave emotion out of it. The lawyers are so eloquent. I wish I could speak that well, and the developers have such vision. I wish I could have that vision, but I have a different vision, and it's not a good one from the problems that are going to result from doubling the maximum. I think money could be made for them, you know, at 115 feet. According to my calculations, they can get rich, and it won't negatively impact the property value and the taxes of the neighbors nearby. Because, let's face it, if a place, let's say $5 million condo goes up near mine, I know my property taxes and everybody else, I might have to move. The whole community might have to change, compounded with the traffic problems and the park, the public's gonna ask us, where's the parking for them? They're at the dog park, I forget the name of it, the place on the corner across from the White House. There are, in my mind, 20 parking spaces at the most. I didn't hear anything about parking for the public access. Are they gonna walk from somewhere? But I do love art and architecture, and I'd love to see that building somewhere else.
Hi, my name is Jill Kahn. I live at 2089 123rd Street, and I've lived there since 1983, and before that I grew up in San Souci, and my dad was actually a city attorney in North Miami when I was a total kid, and I grew up in Breeswet before that and went to Gratney. So my roots are very deep in this community, and actually my heart of North Miami is that little triangle of land that you keep showing. And this is going to be such a negative impact on my existence living on Main Street there. Every single one of those cars is going to have to go through. And another thing is, like, I'm a photographer, so I have to drive everywhere. There's no idea of, oh, live and work in the city. I need to go everywhere. And some of the parts of this city, like Edgewood and downtown, you can't even get through there because of the big buildings on Biscayne Bay, likewise with Aventura. And I'm trapped. When I have to go to a job, I have to leave an hour beforehand. A half hour of that is to get to Biscayne Boulevard, and I live 2 blocks away, okay? There's the progress of the lights. You have to wait for 3 and 4 lights. Sans Souci is equally bad, and you think, oh, it's only the workforce traffic coming through. A lot of it's that, but I see such a nightmare coming when they're changing Broad Causeway now from a toll bridge to a highway. So that's going to further make it a more dangerous situation for me living on Main Street there. And every one of those cars is going to be going by my house. The construction is going to give a lot of dirt and debris. And they said one thing is nice. They're going to temper the existence so it goes right into their land and drain into their land. But right now, 1 hour, and I speak from experience, 1 hour of lane, we're flooded, okay? We are flooded. So we have big problems, and it shouldn't depend on a new building.
You're at 2 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, but just one more thing. Wait, I had one more really important point, and I am very passionate about it because...
Ma'am, you're at 2 minutes.
Okay, well, anyhow.
Others
I'm with
have
you
something
guys.
to say.
And my mom lives in Mariners Bay, so I do have an interest in the other building, and they can still use
Thank
that
you,
land at the
thank
height,
you.
okay?
Good evening, Board. My name is Adam Cohen. I reside at 12,000 North Bayshore Drive. If we're being honest, every person that comes before you tonight is doing mostly with their best interests in mind. It's your role to look through these arguments and make a decision based on its legal merit and whether it's in the best interest of North Miami as a whole. My reason for speaking tonight is that I fear for the financial future of Mariners Bay and its residents. We currently have a $3,000 monthly HOA and a looming $100,000 special assessment. Mariners Bay has been hit by the perfect financial storm, and the future here is very bleak. I believe the only thing stopping a complete fire sale in our building is the current deal that we have with Continuum, a fire sale which will cause harmful ripple effects throughout our entire neighborhood. The city of North Miami has an amazing win-win opportunity. Currently, Mariners Bay generates around $250,000 a year in tax revenue and has a potential catastrophic financial situation for 46 families. The proposed development would generate $20 million in 5 years, $100 million in 20 years, while at the same time alleviating 46 families from their previously mentioned financial burdens. Think of all the ways North Miami could use that extra money. Most people who oppose this project will be the first to complain about the crime and infrastructure issues in their neighborhood. Unfortunately, they want North Miami to add police, fix the flooding by snapping their fingers to make extra cash appear in the budget. We all know it doesn't work like that. I've watched enough of these meetings to know that most of the opposition will never be happy with any proposed development. They simply want their city to look the same forever. My whole life, North Miami has mostly looked the same, while surrounding cities have blossomed. I think it's time we catch up, not only make a beautiful gateway into our city, and also use the
You're at
additional
2 minutes,
tax
sir.
revenue for the city's growing needs. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. David
I'm so-
Pobiak,
hold on.
12,000, I'm sorry?
Hold. If there's anybody else, you can start moving forward so that at least we have an idea. Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you. David Pobiak, 12,000 North Bayshore Drive, apartment 202, Mariners Bay. First of all, what's been said here by the other residents of Mariners Bay, Adam, who just preceded me, as well as Laura Galliano, our president of the board, they're not speaking in hyperbole at all. It's for real. If we don't get this project approved, we all do face a very, very dark future financially, and it's going to be a ripple effect for the rest of the community as well. It's no joke. I've been in 25 plus years in real estate, luxury real estate. I'm very familiar with the Continuum Group. I've sold a lot of their properties in South Beach. They are the icon, not only of Miami Beach, but almost all of the visitor and convention center marketing material. Okay, they know how to make a great project, great building. Okay, and everybody benefits from it. So I'm in favor of the project based on all that.
Thank you.
Hi,
Ma'am, you can go to the next one.
hi, Max Carney, 12,000 North Bay Shore Drive, Unit 306. I wasn't going to say anything, but I do want to address a couple of comments that I heard, and the first being around construction traffic. And I suppose it doesn't matter what the height is if we're, don't want to build anything with traffic. But I think the other thing that I want to speak to, there's been a lot of commentary about how much profit the developer can make, and they're just trying to maximize the profits. I work in commercial real estate finance. I've raised $4.5 billion for institutional operators and developers of real estate. I can tell you in today's capital markets environment, it's not possible to get a project like this off the ground with the increase in cost of insurance, increase in cost of labor and material, increase in cost of borrowing capital, right? And also increasing pressure on what consumers can pay for a product. So I would just like to say, I don't know that there's a lot of merit in these opinions that they can make enough profit as is to make it happen.
Thank you.
Hello, Laura Carney, 12,000 North Bay Shore Drive. I just want to say I'm in agreement for the project. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mylene Garrett. I'm a resident of Mariners Bay as well, and I want to say I'm in favor of the project just because the whole situation with Mariners Bay financials and everything is going to bring a very, very hard financial hardship on all of our families. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maura Hevia. I'm a resident from Marinas Bay, and I'm in favor of this project. Thank you.
Ma'am?
My name's Bethany Schachtel. I'm at 12,000 North Bay Shore. I agree with what Continuum's attorney, Laura Galliano, and Mr. Cohen's statements. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Terry Dowling, 11905 North Bayshore Drive, one of the residences in San Souci. I feel for the Mariner Bay, the residents there. The residents were not against building this new building. It's more of keeping it at the height that it's been agreed on. So we're not against it. It's just more of the agreed height is, was what we're good with. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, members of the commission, staff. I'm Frank Woland. I'm an attorney. My office is at 12865 West Dixie Highway. I represent DZP 306 LLC, which is a property owned by a family that has lived and had businesses in the city for about 40 years. I'm here to speak up for the project and to ask the board to support this development because I think it's something that all the people of North Miami need. This building, the building that's there now, it's in trouble. This is an amazing redevelopment. If you look at the Continuum, the other projects that the developer has built, they're gorgeous. Our city is trying to make redevelopment happen. They allow 400-foot, our city allows 400-foot buildings at Solomia. 230 feet is nothing compared to other cities, the Gables, Sunny Isles, where the cities have a great tax base and it supports the people. You're talking about units, 267 units costing between $1.5 and $3.5 million each. You're talking about people who on average will earn $800,000 or $900,000 a year. They'll spend $32 million a year in our restaurants, in our businesses. They will produce $3.8 million. How many policemen can we afford in our budget with an extra $3.8 million? How many library books? How many park attendants will that? It's going to help the whole city if you permit it, if you support it, if you let it happen. Our city has a long, long history of saying no to development.
2
And
minutes.
I support the board. I support what you did with the property next door, and I hope you'll follow there. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Hector Medina. I'm a retired physician, and I live at 1270 Northeast, 124th Street. It's kind of premature to go, against this building or in favor or against it. Like the chair said in the previous meeting, development is coming. So unfortunately, the city have a lot of loopholes and a bunch of giveaways. And there is very little we can do at this point, and this is part of your responsibilities. But what we need to bring to the city is smart development that is environmentally sensitive and offers no adverse impact on anyone, and a robust community benefit plan. So this is, you're gonna vote, and I wish you well.
Thank you. All right. Public, one more?
Good evening, Board. Derek Cook with the City of North Miami, the Assistant Director of the Land Development Services Office. If I may, Madam Chair, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I wanted to bring some clarity that was said by the applicant on the side of staff to hopefully help you with your decision-making, if you would, before you get into your deliberation as a board.
A quick point of clarification. Mr. Cook, do we have any more community input? I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that we close that before moving to staff recommendations and continue discussion with the applicant.
So we'll close public hearing.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. You
Ma'am.
wanted to add to what staff said earlier?
If I may, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So in the context that was presented by the applicant, I think there were some intriguing points that were put forth articulately and very elegantly on the applied side of the client. Some things that they put forth that they considered as that they talked about practical difficulties opposed to a hardship. And before I even go into that, I think it's important to say that as a staff member and as a part of the Land Development Department, our desire is to have the best development that we possibly can in our city to help it grow and develop. And we're looking for exciting, innovative projects that are sustainable and that is going to bring value to our community and create a community where it's not a drive-through, but is a stopping place for people to come, eat, play, and live. That said, there's a proper amount of way you can go about achieving that goal. And in doing so, the question is, do you want to go through the variance process systematically, changing our land development regulations by creating no continuity whatsoever, this height at 203, the next height at 238 feet, and so forth. So the purpose of our variance, as has been stated, whether it's for difficulties, practical or not, or whether it's for a hardship, is to give a person remedy when necessary, to allow for them to develop their property, and we are all about that. The variance process is not intended to allow you to enhance your project for financial means whatsoever. That is not a consideration of our variance process whatsoever. So, on many occasions within the presentation and by others, they have talked about the financial concerns and what it can benefit the city. And we don't doubt it. I look at the project and it is fabulous. It is something that we would like to have in our city. But again, I'm going to go back how you go about it. So it's something that was stated earlier by other residents who came up is, and it was said by staff, when you're looking at changing the height systematically in a district, you're doing what I would call a change of our code and the purpose of the code. And as you can see by tonight, by the different, you have people are for and against this project. It's about 50-50 here. That even in its own right shows you that this is a process that needs to go through a public hearing, more robust, where you can see to have it go to planning commission talk about it, access it, and do a recommendation to city council, and then it goes to city council, and they review it, and they do it twice. Why? Because city council is the entity, as you understand, that institute policy change in our city. And as was said by staff earlier, when the BZ zone was created, Myoko Tower was already existing, and the tower that was in the R4 district they talked about, Bay Shore, was already existing. So there's only one of these buildings that is specific to the zoning district, and that's the one that is in that district, Myoko Tower. And at 169 feet, when the BZ zone was created, if the city so desired to have a height of that type at that time, they would have set it at 169, 175, 200. But they chose a policy of 115 feet, which apparently must have been the will of the council and the people at that time. Now, if the time has come in our community that this needs to change, then again, the will of the council and the community should be taken in consideration, and it should go through the process that is incumbent upon that, which is going to planning commission and to city council to make a policy change that is going to impact the whole community in that area. So specific to what was said by the applicant, that I think we need to be clarity about it. To talk about two frontages. So we understand anybody that lives on the coast have two frontages. That is not a grounds for a variance. Another aspect that the applicant spoke about is that they have submerged lands. So in our code, we speak to submerged lands in this capacity. When you have submerged land, you cannot draw your setbacks from the submerged land area, which gives you an idea of where staff and our policy stand. Yes, you have submerged land, but you can't have it like theirs, maybe 100 feet out into the water, and then you say, oh, well, that's where your setback is going to start from. So submerged land is not a hardship. He talked about the irregular lot. I think it's important that our staff attorney, Mr. Hill, for you, said last time when we had the other item, when he talked about the Coral Gable project, and they were using about irregular lots. It's important to understand that they also, in a subsequent ruling on this matter, discussion on this matter, they said that it needs to have an effect where the property is essentially virtually unusable and cannot bring about a benefit, which is something that the community has brought about this evening. You can still bring about a benefit, and this property is definitely usable without a height variance. So these things that you need to think about. And it talked about the neighborhood context and what it's going to bring. I think it's, again, just to reiterate, a building of this magnitude is going to have an impact on the community. And the question is, do we do it through a variance process, or we do it through the process of going to the community, having meetings, talk about this change, because this is a policy change that we are talking about doing. There's no more lots in the BZ zone. You have Myoko, you have the lot that was beside Myoko that sits between this property and Myoko, and then you have the park, and then you have the extension of the BZ zone that we went through the process for the White House Inn project to change that from R4 to BZ. Outside of that, there are no more BZ zones in our city. So in essence, what you would do by granting this variance, you have done a policy change. And I don't know, even if that's the course that we desire through the variance process, just to reiterate that. So this is just points, just for clarity sake, to give you food for thought on the implications that is before us. It was stated by staff, we are appealing the decision that was made by the board in October. We're appealing it based on the merit of the procedure. It's not that we're not for development. It's not that we don't think that this development as it's presented is a wonderful execution of the site. But if we're going to have a policy change, it's something that should be decided by our city council. And that's my plea to you to consider this evening. Thank you.
I have some time for rebuttal, Madam Chair, and I just want to address some comments.
Not that word.
No, it is my rebuttal with respect to the application, and I want to make sure. But I'll add to the dialogue, if you will.
There you go.
So I want to first address some of the comments that Mr. Cook raised, because I think at the end of the day, his comments prove too much. Essentially, he's telling you that any time that there is a variance that you approve, you're making a policy decision. He's essentially vitiating your role as the Board of Adjustments. Your role is to look at a specific site, analyze that specific site under the 6 criteria that is before you, and make a determination. We are not asking you to change the height for the BZ. We're asking you to change the height for our property, based off of the evidence that we have presented with respect to our property. And so from our viewpoint, it's inappropriate for him to talk about the idea that this is a policy change when we're not asking for a change to the BZ. We have to come in for our property, explain our site, give you evidence and information regarding our property so that we can substantiate the 4 criteria under your code that will substantiate a variance request. And so from my standpoint, it doesn't make sense that the idea that you would provide for a variance of the height creates an idea that you're creating policy. You could say the same thing for setbacks. Anytime that you reduce a setback and say that somebody's entitled to a setback, you're creating policy because the city council created a specific setback. Anytime you do that for any item that comes before this BOA, you are providing a variance to something that the city council has adopted. So at the end of the day, his argument proves too much because he would essentially vitiate your role and make you obviated, but that's not your role. Your role is to look at specific sites, to analyze specific sites with respect to the criteria under the code that the BOA hears, and to make a determination on them. So I just want to address those issues. The next item that I want to address, and I see Mr. Cook seems pretty excited to come up and keep rebutting me for some reason. But the key item that I want to address with respect to this property is that there were a variety of folks who came up here and talked about density. We are not talking about density. We have density. The site is in the BZ. It has the density. That is not an appropriate aspect with respect to the site. We're not talking about that. The items that are before you are the 6 criteria and whether we meet them. This development is going to provide for the enhancement of this area, is going to provide for the benefits to the city that are going to help to address the issues with respect to the park. There are a variety of comments with respect to parks. And the reason why this is relevant to your perspective is because the last aspect and criterion of your code with respect to variances, which is that the project will not be injurious to the city. And this will not be. In 5 years, we're talking about unrestricted dollars of over $20 million that can be used to enhance the area. We're talking about the opportunity that before any building is on or constructed, that we have the ability to provide $3.3 million with respect to the site. Now, I'm not going to belabor the point. I want to hear from the board directly, so I'm going to leave it at that. But I think that it was important to clarify some of these items because a lot of what you've heard tonight are simply not relevant. And with respect to our site, we think that it's appropriate with respect to the variance request. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Well, board discussion. You guys gotta have questions.
I have lots of questions.
I have a question.
But please go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question. This question is actually directed towards staff. Seem as if you guys keep mentioning the process that the applicant and the attorney are using. You mentioned them circumventing, I guess, the traditional way of what it is that they're requesting.
So is it safe to say, although it isn't traditional, but it's within their right, the way they've done it?
So, if I may, through the chair, the application is before you because they are entitled to due process.
So if they ask to be heard in front of this board, you have to put in the
Yes,
application?
yes.
Okay.
They put in the application, they pay the fee. Whether they meet the criteria to get a recommendation or approval or not, they are entitled to due process.
Okay. Also, you mentioned 4 months ago back in October, and we're here again in February. What's being done so we're not here again in June, July? On staff's end, so this problem doesn't happen again where they circumvent or go through a non-traditional process.
City staff has filed an appeal of the October decision to grant the height variance. That appeal will be heard by mayor and council on Tuesday, February 27th. So city staff has appealed the previous variance that was granted. We are hoping that mayor and council will overturn and revoke that variance.
Okay, that's for that particular
Correct.
variance, but how about an overall, a blanketed policy change? Or,
I'll defer to city staff on any discussions
So-
on future policy amendments.
So our intent, understanding that we have a blind spot in the land development regulations, is to address this. And we have been in conversation with legal on how we will craft that text amendment and to eliminate this as being an issue. We're still thinking over that. Will it be a complete sequester of this, or will it be some remedies within that text amendment that allows for people to seek it? One of the process that we're thinking about doing is that when somebody's looking for a height that meets certain criteria, that it has to go to city council for their approval.
okay. And a question for the applicant. As I mentioned in the disclosure, I attended the community meeting that you guys had. I sat in the back and I observed. Did anything come out of that meeting that you wish to share, willing to share? Was there a meeting of the minds?
So we provided a presentation as part of that meeting. We had a meeting that was open to the public. We provided a detailed presentation, and as part of that community meeting, we actually showed what we were developing. We showed what the height is that we were requesting. And at least at that time, there wasn't the folks coming out here and objecting to the project. So at the community meeting that we had with respect to the site, that's essentially the time by which we engage in the community process in order to understand what the community is saying regarding the site. And what we heard during that meeting was actually that there are folks in support of the project. There are folks who are supportive of the project. And so we felt comfortable being able to come back before this board because of that community meeting and the fact that there wasn't any opposition with respect to the site. So one of the reasons why we have moved forward with this process is not just because of due process rights, but we've gone through the fact that it's legally permitted, and we've gone through the process of engaging with the community, having community meetings, so that we can come before this board. And so we spent that time, we spent money being able to engage in that process, and we think it would only be fair for us to be able to further engage in this with respect to the site, because we've gone through that process that's laid out and that's expected as part of this process before the BOA. And then finally, the last point I'll note is that there's been notations about community meetings and public hearings, but that's exactly what we've done here. We're right now at a public hearing. We've had community meetings. And so the idea that this process somehow is lacking because there isn't some sort of due process or that people aren't being heard, I think is against the weight of the facts, given the fact that we're here on a publicly recorded meeting in a public hearing.
All right, thank you. That's it for now, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Shields.
Are there other questions?
I
From our
think
board?
you were the two. Go ahead.
Okay. I've got several questions, and I just want to make sure that I'm in full of understanding of why we're here chatting about this variance today, and in specific, what the best process is in general. So really, my line of questioning is in four different things. One, I want to better understand the project. Two, I want to really understand what the impact and urgency of us meeting on this now is versus, let's say, after the appeal or after other sets of meetings, maybe during the summer. Why are we chatting on this today in February? I also want to understand the due process, and in specific, what authority the Board of Adjustment has on decisions like this. And then last, I want to talk about the basis thereof if we were to grant any type of variance, why that may be, because that's very, very important. So first, talking about the project itself, I guess my question to, some of these questions will be to staff and some of these will be to the applicant, so I'm glad that you're both here. Let's first talk about the project itself. Why specifically does the applicant need a height variance in order to achieve, its business plan, whether you define it as practical difficulties or undue hardship? Why couldn't the applicant develop this under the current allowed height of, I believe, about 112 feet?
So I think that's an excellent question. The first aspect is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to the site today in order to put it in a construction-ready mode. The first is that, and I talked about it somewhat, we're going to be increasing the seawall for climate resiliency. Today, the seawall that is there is only 6 feet. We're going to be increasing it to up to 8 feet with respect to the site for a distance of 586 lineal feet. That's a substantial investment that we're coming in out of pocket in order to build that up. In addition, with respect to our site, I don't know about other sites, but this site does have land that is submerged that we cannot build on. We just can't build on it. So I have not said anything about a setback from the submerged land. That's not relevant to what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is the fact that we have land that we own that we can't build on. And so from our viewpoint, we're unable to utilize that land to build on the site. In addition, we have to be able to provide for the drainage improvements that have to occur. Because of the site's existing configuration, there is drainage when it rains that goes into the road. We're going to have to address that with our dollars. We're going to have to put that money in to address those issues. And then when you take into account the variety of issues with respect to the market, you take a look at construction costs. You take a look at insurance costs. Insurance costs is a massive issue when it comes to redeveloping sites. You have to take that into account as you're developing a property that's going to merit the type of sales prices that is going to warrant the type of building that's going to make us money that's going to make the developer money with respect to the site. So the only way that any developer in any capitalist framework can do a development and come before you is to say, what are the numbers that make this project work given the amount of investment I have to come in on the front end? And I just talked about a variety of things that we have to do, but we also have to do impact fee that's coming out of pocket before we build anything. Before we move forward with anything, we're going to have to come out of pocket to get those items done. So I think those issues address the issues with respect to the project and why we need to get to the height. This is not something that we're just coming before this board willy-nilly on. We've done an analysis on this project with respect to this site, analyze what we have to do for resiliency and for improvements, and that's why we're coming before you with the height variance that we're requesting this evening.
Okay, understood. A couple other questions about the project, and then I'll move to impact and urgency. So about the project, several concerns have been made, specifically about flooding, about traffic, and the potentiality, both during the construction period and after you've built it, and the additional units that would obviously be placed here. What are you doing to mitigate those issues, both during construction and after?
So one of the benefits of the site, I'm going to take the first issue that you raised, which is first the flooding. The direct reason why there is flooding along Bayshore Drive is because Mariners Bay is old. And because of the time in which it was built, the regulations that govern its development did not require them to retain drainage on site. The moment we come in for the redevelopment, we're going to address that. We're going to come in and we're going to retain drainage on site. And we're currently looking at analyzing how do we, on the front end, provide for those improvements at the very beginning. So that's one aspect. With respect to the traffic, and I think that this is a very interesting issue that you've hit on, and I'm going to break this up into two subparts. One is going to be construction traffic, and then the other is going to be actual traffic from the development. The construction traffic, when you look at our site, we have 586 lineal feet. This site is over 4.23 acres. We have 2 acres of land that we can develop on, and we've already developed the type of staging that can ensure that all of the traffic can come onto the property for the construction of this property, because it's wide enough to encompass the construction traffic. So it's not going to spill over into the Bayshore, and it will be able to accommodate this development. But with respect to traffic, with respect from this project, it's anticipated that this project will be sold on average for about $2.5 million per condo. We anticipate that a lot of our residents are going to be second home buyers. So we anticipate two things. One, the type of traffic you're going to get from this development is not the type of traffic that impacts peak hour, because the type of residents who are living here are not the type of residents who are going out during the peak hour traffic. But then in addition, they're seasonal home buyers. And so they're not here all the time with respect to this project. And so that's why we think with respect to the traffic impact, it's not going to be an adverse impact, and it's actually going to be better for the residents of the area because of the nature of the residents who will be living there.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk impact and urgency. So why are we talking about this now?
So
why, well, hold on, if you don't mind. Why is this before our board? Why are we talking about this in, I believe this was originally on the agenda in January. It got moved to February. What is the urgency around us speaking on these items now? Like, I just want to more clearly understand that. Is it because of the project? Is it because of the issues that several owners at Mariners Bay have spoken about? What is driving the urgency for us making a change or suggesting a change or a variance in any type of way, shape, or form?
Okay, so I think the number one issue that is spurring the change with respect to urgency is the new milestone law that was created with respect to Surfside. And when you take into account, whenever you have a condominium now in the state of Florida that is in existence, and you have a 40-year recertification, you have a timeline by which you have to take into account those repairs, reconstruction, whatever you need to do. And so in order to address that issue as soon as possible and to provide for a development framework and timeline that will ensure that the residents of Mariners Bay are not adversely impacted, because if you don't meet it within that timeline, you are going to be harmed. And so if we're not able to move forward with the project, because as you well know, there's a process that comes even after the variance. We have to still come back before the city council with respect to the site plan and talk about those issues and get the site plan approved. The reason why we were trying to get on in December, the reason why we were trying to get on in January is because of that specific timeline. There is a deadline that is...
What's the deadline?
I don't have the specific deadline in front of me, but I know that it requires that they have to resubmit the 40-year recertification, and upon submitting the 40-year recertification, I want to say it's 30 days, 30 to 60 days to address the recertification and to pay for it. And so that's why we've been seeking to move forward as soon as possible in order to get this project done with respect to this project.
Okay, so how old exactly is Mariners Bay?
It's over 40 years. I want to say 43 years.
43, so it's beyond the
It's beyond the 40 years, that's
of
correct.
Recertification.
That's correct.
Which we all know is incredibly important because of Champlain Towers, Surfside. Okay, how much would it be? I'm sure there's already been studies done on the recertification, and I know we're talking technically to the applicant, but I know that you're also in touch with Mariners Bay, so please excuse me for asking you questions about their situation. How much exactly would it be if we were to keep Mariners Bay and vote down on this and you didn't have this development, for them to actually recertify the building? I'm very curious on that.
So the preliminary estimates that have occurred with respect to the site is over $3 million in order to address just the concrete restoration for the property. And so there's already existing today a $3,000 additional assessment that the owners have to deal with today with respect to that preliminary assessment. 300,000. Okay, but there's a significant assessment.
My understanding was the $3,000 HOA that they're paying every month is because of insurance, and that there was additional.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, please stop. Yes, we understand that. Thank you. Do we want to use the president to come and provide accurate information that the board can rely
absolutely.
on? Is that okay?
Absolutely, because I want to, I do want to speak on this and move forward, speaking about the variance, each of the items,
So
why
reintroduce
we're meeting
yourself
on
and
this, and
whatever
this isn't
information
going through a
you
text
provide.
amendment process. I need,
just
like,
to answer
why
his
this isn't going
question.
to our council, like, I want to get to those questions. I just want to move forward past this, so please, I'm saying please, like, respond to what I just asked, but I'm saying there's
Just
other
that
things that are
question.
important about variance.
So
Please.
just to your question.
Mhm.
State your name, please.
Laura Galliano, president of president of Mariners Bay Condo Association. So we have a $3.5 million 40-year recertification that actually the contract has expired, so we'd have to renegotiate it, and we expect that that would go up with only 46 units. That's $100,000 a person, many of whom are on fixed incomes. Our insurance went up 800% because of the insurance crisis in Florida. And we're looking at, the majority of our HOA fees go towards the insurance payment. And we actually are expected to go up another 20 to 30% when our budget renews in April.
But, I'm sorry, but we just want to understand about that whole recertification process.
So the recertification, I mean, do you want me to?
3 point,
Do you need more information, or you?
I'm good with the information. I think what I'm trying to get after is part of the reason we're speaking about this period is not only because of the idea of whether this should be a variance or a text amendment, but also because it seems like there's some sense of urgency over this decision. And I want to understand, really for the sake of whether to continue this item to future meetings, why we should be making a decision now rather than continuing this to future meetings this year or potentially next year. That's why I'm asking this question.
So our 40-year is past due, way past due. It's about 2 years past due. I think because of COVID, we got sort of sidetracked, and then there was some internal bickering about, what we should spend money on. But when we finally got to the point, we were at like the insurance and everything. I mean, we were literally at a cliff. And that's really where we've been. And we started seeing, people not being able to pay their HOAs. We saw people not being able to pay taxes, which you can look up, not paying property taxes. And so that's where we are. We went to the building official and said, can we please, please, please hold off on this until, there's a resolution on the sale of the building, because there's no point in us assessing everybody, buying all sorts of materials, start renovating just to sell it. And so he said, okay, provided you can get yet another structural report that you're not going to fall down tomorrow. So we have that, but it only lasts a couple months, and I forget what that is. And so 60 days. And so every time we have to ask for that extension, we're getting to the point where they're going to say, no, no more. And then everybody in this building is going to be in really financial distress. And so that's really the urgency and the reason why so many of us are here.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Let's talk about due process, because I want to understand why this is not going, especially after the October vote on a similar item, why this isn't going through a text amendment process. And first off, let's peel back the onion here a little bit. What is a text amendment? What does that mean? For the folks who are here today or who are watching, what does that mean? Why is this going through a variance and not that process? I think this might be a question for both the applicant and staff.
So, to get into the weeds of the technicalities there. So a variance is a deviation of your land development regulations. So we have established development standards in our code. Specific in this situation is height. 115 feet is the development standard maximum height for the BZ zone. They are seeking a variance to deviate from that requirement to allow for them to increase that height by another 1,515 feet, 3 feet, 118 feet actually, to go up. So doubling it. So that's the variance. You're deviating from the code. A text amendment is exactly what it says. You are amending what your code is. And you're going through that process that requires your planning commission review with recommendation to city council, and then through 2 readings at city council to approve that text amendment, because it's considered a big deal. You are amending your policies of the city at that point. And it's twofold. you would have to amend our comprehensive plan, because within that is codified as a maximum height for the BZ zone, 115 feet. And then the other shoe is the land development regulations, which is your zoning, which has it codified at 115 feet, and that would require a text amendment as well. So both of those items would have to go through the planning commission and city council.
Okay. So why are we talking about a variance instead of this going through that process?
He applied for it.
I want to know why.
Yeah, so one of the things that's important to keep into account as you think about a text amendment to the BZ is that there's already applications that have occurred on other sites within the BZ. When you take into account the urgency for this specific site and what we'd be doing to the entirety of the BZ, that would mean from White House Inn all the way down to Majorca Towers. The height that we would be providing or adopting for that would encompass all of that. And so what was very clear as part of the process for the White House is that there was not an interest with respect to that site to have an increase in height. And so what ends up happening is that you lose the discussion for our specific site to talk about the reasons why we need it for our specific site. And we start talking about it as a whole within the entire area of the BZ. And quite frankly, one of the reasons that we think it would be inappropriate to do it in this context is because what will end up happening is that there are going to be certain constituent members who will believe that what we're really doing as part of the BZ amendment is trying to get a higher height at White House. So instead of talking about this project at this specific site, we would end up in a discussion about whether we're providing for that aspect for White House or something else. Then you get into a discussion about whether you're going to start limiting in your text amendment where the text of the height occurs. So you end up now having this broad idea, and now you're going to say, oh, well, we're going to specifically limit it to this area. Okay, for how broad of an area? So you can see as we start peeling back the onion with respect to a text amendment, the more we start talking about it, the more we get away from our site with respect to our practical difficulties, our hardships, and the more we start talking about everything as a whole.
Okay, so if a text amendment was done, just to be clear here, that would permanently change the zoning of that site regardless of whether this applicant develops it or they do what a lot of us in the community do not like in the White House Inn, of them selling it to somebody else who then has the opportunity to develop at that same height, but didn't go through the same rigorous process of community input. And the like. I want to be clear. Would that happen if there was a text amendment?
So for clarity's sake, there's a lot that's been stated here, muddying the water with White House Inn, and so I'm going to address all of that in specific to your question, Chairman, Boardman Shields. So if you do a text amendment, it will encompass the whole BZ zone. Same thing would have been the case for White House Inn. White House Inn is uniquely different than this. If you were going through this text amendment, it is specific to height. White House Inn was seeking a land use amendment and a zoning change, and it was also seeking to increase the height of the BZ zone. And then they proffered a covenant to restrict that height. All right? And within their application, they also, to make it specific to their site, that height, they put in criteria that you need to meet this, you have to have this frontage, that frontage, and then would have limited to them. So the key thing with White House Inn, why they would need it as super majority, they were seeking a land use and a zoning change. This wouldn't be the case here. We're just seeking an amendment to our land use amendment and our LDRs to modify the height to make it bigger.
And council can do that.
And council can do that.
Okay.
So when you're talking about would it be so people talking about so it was mentioned, well, it's a behind the back move to do this. White House Inn is already restricted by a covenant that if only way it can be broken is it go back to city council and city council vote against something that they had requested to be done.
Okay.
Okay, so there's implications that's going to bring out, and all of that is a public, and it's going to bring out the people who's the naysayers and things like that, and the implications behind that. Same thing holds true here. Just for clarity, when they was going through that process with White House Inn, it was a lot of language being said then. It's not good for that site, but north of 123rd, it'd be great for for greater height. That was said consistently throughout that process. Oh, do I need to get even deeper into the weeds? Not at White House Inn site. Let's change site. Let's go to the let's change the park and use the park as the site to build and make the White House into a park. These were things that were said during that process. So whether the community is we have community who's against it, the height, and you have community members who are for height on this. And I think even more so, that's why we need to have the vigorous conversation that involves the complete vetting of this request through Planning Commission and City Council and the other community meetings that's specific to the implications of changing the whole BZ zone rather than piecemealing it. Because contrary to what has been said, now that you have changed one site to 203 feet, and if you choose to change this site to 238 feet, 4 inches, you have changed BZ zone's height. And anybody, you'll ask the question, anybody, whether it's this applicant or next applicant, once that height is changed, it is with the land.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank
So,
you.
so
Any-
the only thing I want to say with respect to that is that it's clear that the text amendment would change the entire BZ instead of just addressing our site. So I just want to put a button on it with respect to that issue because we want to make sure that we're limiting it to our site.
So,
Thank
any
you.
other,
Just-
Ms. Modesty? Do you have another question?
No, one final question. I mean, I think this was a robust discussion. I don't want to keep everybody here all night, and I appreciate it, but I really want to understand, just finally, and I think some other folks may have some questions on this, the case for the variance itself. I think you obviously made a point of why you believe this fits all 6 criteria, because at the end of the day, that's what this board is for making decisions on variances involving at least 4 of the 6 criteria moving forward. So regardless of due process, urgency, et cetera, it's important that we also keep in mind that. A lot of your questions already on the project and the presentations answered many of those. I think one of the items that I just want to make sure that I'm clear on is number 4 in specific, which is essentially the interpretation of LDRs would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by properties in the same zoning district. I'm not sure how exactly that applies to this. I just in general, I'd love to just get a better understanding on that. I think I have a pretty clear picture of some of the items personally on the other 5 items.
And so, look, I think what we wanted to do was provide a robust discussion about it. And the way your code is established, we only have to show 4. The position that we were taking is that the legally nonconforming use is an aspect of your LDRs that permit a zoning height that is higher than 115. But if the board so chooses, it doesn't have to say that we meet 4. Number 4, we meet 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. We still have 4 of the 6 criteria. But from our vantage point, you could take the analysis that because the LDRs allow for a legally nonconforming use, that legally nonconforming height that's respect to the Majorca Towers, that's what allows us to demonstrate that a project within the same zoning district enjoys rights that are not commonly enjoyed because they have a height that exceeds 115 feet. And so that's the argument that we've raised. But to the point, because it's not addressing 4, we have 5 other items that we easily, I think, meet. I don't think we have to go and have a detailed dialogue and back and forth on that, but that's the basis that we were providing for it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I hear your questions, Mr. Shield. In terms of what Mr. Cook said as it relates to changing the codes, or this is what we're doing. I've been on this board, and I'm sorry, I just have to give this little story. I've been on this board since, I want to say, the early 90s, where our decisions used to always go to city council. A while back, that was changed so that council would not have to hear so many of these things that the board could take care of. But when it relates to issues such as this, I don't know. I know that staff, in my conversation with staff, they're not opposed to the project, and neither am I, and I don't think neither anyone on this board. We see it as something viable. That is something, it may not agree with everybody in terms of where they'd like to meet, but like I said, and I think I was one of the people back in October, I voted on everything else for that project, but did not vote on the height solely because of how it was presented. But it went through. We're sitting here with an issue that has been unresolved since October that we voted upon. Probably because we may have stepped beyond what we were supposed to do in terms of our powers here. I don't know. But I still want to say to you, Mr. Cassan, and to everybody else out there, I hear Majorca Towers is being thrown so many. When we decide on an item, we have to decide on the item for that particular item only, regardless of what was done 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. It's that particular item. Me, I always say to people, I'm the average Jane. I see things how the normal person would see it. I don't think this is a win-win here. I think we're going to see a delay no matter what. These people at Mariners, no matter what, they're gonna have a delay, whether it's us who create the delay or the city that's gonna create the delay. I don't know. I just don't see where we're going to come out and make this, like, I don't know, a situation for everybody to be able to, you know, we made a decision in October. We're here in February, and that decision is not able to move forward. So we could make a decision here, but let's say we approve, then what happens? Is the city appealing? And then when they appeal, they're back in the same situation of, you know, they're being delayed. Your 40-year reinspection, all that, nothing's moving forward here. I don't know.
Mr. Cook, you were going to
Go ahead.
state something? Oh, it seemed like you were going to.
So and thank you, Madam Chair, and indulging
No, it's
this.
my frustration.
And indulging in this on this matter, and again, the project is a lovely project. Okay, it is. It's no doubts about it. The applicant, depending on where you stand, the design of the building will be enhancing to the community, to the city. You know, and it's going to have some impact. It will. But it's going to be enhanced because it's a good looking building. You know what I'm saying? Things that we want in our city. You know, outside of just in Solar Mill. You know, we want it in the city, the heart of the city, where everybody can see it, not being. That said, but it's something, Mr. Shield, that you brought up that I thought was important because you talked about the 6 criteria and about them meeting the criteria, and you had a concern about one of them. Again, the staff says that they don't meet any of them. Even in the wake of what the applicant has stated as means for their right, meeting them, I would contest, based on my professional opinion and assessment of the code, they do not meet those criterias. Number two, unusual circumstances presented in the neighborhood, said they're sandwiched between two frontages, two right-of-ways. That is not grounds for a variance. That does not hinder their ability to be able to develop this site at all. You know, another aspect of it. Now, literal interpretation of the LDRs denies them rights, and they use as an example Myoka Tower and they use Bayview Tower. These are non-conforming. Because they're non-conforming, doesn't establish any kind of precedence for the area whatsoever. The fact that they're non-conforming clearly indicate that if they were destroyed today and they weren't invested right, they wouldn't be able to rebuild it at that height. Neither one of them. Again, number 5, the minimum variance to allow. They use seawall, marketing issues, insurance issue costs. Drainage improvements is something they're going to have to do with the new development regardless. That is part of the code. Period, point blank. You must secure your storm water on your site. Every new site has to do that. That is nothing unusual. Interest rates is not a grounds for a variance. This is number 5. So we got right now, we're down to just 2 maybe. They have. And I would contest they don't even have those.
Chairwoman, I want to address your specific question. The fastest route for us to get this done would be by getting a decision for the BOA. As staff has already noted, they've been contemplating an ordinance to address this issue. There's no ordinance that's been in place. If we go through this process for a full ordinance change, for a full text amendment, it's going to take another 9 to 12 months. And it's going to take us negotiating with staff to talk about where is it going to apply, what the height is going to be, what the text amendment is going to be, going through that process, negotiating that process. So to address your specific point, which I don't think was asking him to argue the points with respect to the 6 criteria, this would be the fastest route, is for us to get a decision from this BOA.
I get that, but what I'm saying is the BOA may decide, but our decision, the same that happened, we know we're going down that route. So I want the people right now who this is affecting, for them to understand, regardless of what we do, you still have city council, and because of staff and what's on the books, it's going to be appealed. And what happens during the appeal? Because we're still waiting for the decision made in October. I can't believe it's taking that long, but you know, this is council. Council could change all of that. Why are we, you know, go ahead, Mr. Held. Got it right this time.
Thank you. It seems as if you should decide what's before you and not what might come.
Yeah, that's true. Well?
So, Madam Chair, if I may, to the applicant's point, what we was wanting to do is allow for council to opine on the variance appeal, and then that would give us a roadmap on the temperature of city council and how we should proceed forward with this one. So if city council go in and they just put the hammer down and say no, then we know what we need to do. City council go in there and say, you know, we don't have a problem with this, it's going forward, then we know what is the will of council. That's why we was asking the applicant to defer until we know where city council stood.
But the whole reason why and I'm going to be very short here, the whole reason why we think this needs to be heard is because this is a specific site that has to show on its own merits how we meet the variance criteria. And we're going to have to demonstrate that before the city council. And so that's the perspective that we have. We think that this decision is going to be something that has to go before the council. The idea that this is tethered to something else, I don't think is going to be what ends up happening. The city council is going to have to make a decision on this one way or another.
We understand. I don't think it's, well, in some ways, I would like to say, yes, it's not tethered to something else, but ideally, our decision is not based on anything else that we've done before. But in some ways, with this moving forward, I don't know. I still think it is based upon what's gonna happen at city council. Is there a way? And I understand your urgency, maybe you don't wanna come back to the board or something, but is there a way that whatever, I don't even know how my colleagues wanna vote on it, but let's say if they were to favor your project, could we put into some provisions that it is based on what happens at city council? Because,
I have a thought on that, but I
It's
know Ms. Weinstein had a
automatically
comment.
based on it.
I'm sorry, it's
automatically based on it. Either they will act on October's appeal by reversing the decision, or they will let it stand. And if this is appealed, the same thing will happen. It will establish, if not legal precedent, a practical precedent on the decision you make today. There's really no need for you to extend, and let's do this again another time, because whatever the council will do, they will do. And you'll know next week.
you know, we get these things, and I said, I've probably been here too long. We used to get these things, and I'm sure if Mr. Rowland was, yeah, he's still sitting in the back. We had issues like this as it relates to fence height until that thing was resolved by planning and, you know, whatever, it got changed in the code. And at one time it was docks, all, you know, down in Keystone, and I got so tired of it. But that got resolved, and here we are. Remember, we had a case as it relates to fence with the new fence that are, now, if we're not being proactive to see what's coming down the road, and I know I said it before, I'm repeating myself, those height development, they're gonna come. I understand you guys with the wonderful homes over there, but if you drive all the way down on Biscayne, you go from here to Aventura, those people are looking for higher buildings so they can look at the water. On the other parts of our city, yes, you're getting development, you're getting we're getting apartments everywhere. They may not be going that high because there's nothing to look at. No one wants to look at roads, but people want to look at water. I mean, I'm being honest. Okay. Off my
Ms. Weinstein,
soapbox.
do you have a question or comment?
Yes,
Because if not, I wanted to respond
Ms.
to.
Monastery?
I mean, I did, but I felt like
Please.
we really
Did I make
had,
you forget it?
we had a full conversation, a little circular too.
Okay.
So I don't want to belabor. I just wanted staff to clarify, can you refresh my memory on when site plan approval would go before the council? Is it a certain lot size that requires site plan approval for council?
20,000 square feet or more,
Okay.
a development area, yeah.
What's the square footage for this one? 'Cause
They
they're
far
not
exceed it, yeah, they would have to go.
So they
through
would
site-
get
Yes.
to go to council again?
Mhm.
Okay. And then in that process, is council also going to consider, outside of the appeal, what the height
No.
would be?
No, once, if y'all, if in your wisdom, y'all decide to grant this and it stays, that's the height for the development. And I guess council could get up there, really, it really wouldn't be anything, because this is really the, site plan approval. If they meet all criteria, it's like an administrative, review, but at city council level. They shouldn't be able to put any request any kind of,
I feel like I've
restricted
seen that
covenants for
before.
heights and things like that. It go, and they would just review it, and there you go. We have this on the way. Hopefully they will break ground and build.
Okay. So I guess my next question, if the appeal is approved, would that automatically mean that the decision, if favorable, is reversed for this project as well? Or would it have to go through an appeal process as well?
So the appeal on Tuesday night is limited to the October variance that was approved. So
Mhm.
it would only void out and revoke that variance.
Okay.
But as Mr. Cook alluded, it would give staff and administration a roadmap to know what to do next and what to know to do with this variance. So as Chairwoman was alluding to, if Mayor and Council, if it is the will of the Mayor and Council to revoke that first variance, city staff will be filing an appeal of the second variance if it is approved tonight.
Okay, so then the appeal would go to the same council.
Exactly.
For them to decide if they want to see the height or not. Okay. And then someone mentioned during public comment that another height was being considered at the community meeting. Is that so?
No.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I got that clear. All right, that's it. Thank you.
I have a question for staff. Mr. Cook, you mentioned in the 6 criteria, you graded them a 0 out of 6, obviously based on the height variance. Let's say it was a different type of variance they were seeking. Would it be assessed differently or pretty much the same score?
It depends. It would be assessed based on that specific variance. To give you an example, forgive me, board, I know we're running. For the previous one, they had variance for the setback for the balconies and things like that. Even though we couldn't recommend approval because they didn't meet all the criteria, we wasn't opposed to it because in principle, they did not fall out of the criteria of what balconies can encroach to, which is no closer than 2 or 5 feet into the property line, even though they was moving closer. So I said, as a whole, they would still be in the character of our city as a whole, not exceeding that.
I'd like to call the question.
My opinion on this, just very quickly, it's been a long night, and there was a lot of questions, a lot of community input, and I really appreciate everyone staying here. Listen, I haven't been on this board for 30 years plus. It's only been 4. But what I can say is I do believe that this board has an authority to, as a quasi-judicial board, to make recommendations based off of our opinions from the applicant and based off of our experience. And I can say that what we saw in October, which is similar to this but a different application altogether, was certainly the most controversial thing I've seen on this board, and I think our chair would agree probably from her,
Oh, no.
No, a little bit more. I mean, hey, we had a fence that we argued about for a year. I remember that one.
With you guys, but you don't know what
Yeah.
we've been.
Yeah. So that said, listen, we have to vote and decide upon what's presented before us. We voted in favor of that. I believe it's because we believe that majority of those 6 items, 4 or more, obviously, if folks are voting in favor of it, it's because we believe that 4 of the 6 criteria are a yes and not a no. However, listen, I think a big test of leadership is recognizing that when you're wrong on something and recognizing that, especially when you're tested in ways like that, how we could better our process. I'm of the opinion after that meeting that, listen, I think whether we're in favor of this or not, this is something that has to go before our council. Whether that goes through a text amendment process or through a variance and then us putting it subject to council discussion and approval, I believe this has to go through our council. And I've said that to anybody who's met with me or spoken to me about this in general, just to be transparent and clear. And the reason that is because when it comes to this issue, we're not just talking about a dock, we're not talking about a fence, we're talking about something that affects thousands of folks in this area. And this is something that deserves the robust community discussion of everyone who lives in that area, but also our whole city. And it's something that really should be decided on elected officials who represent our community, right? That said, I also, we're in between a rock and a hard place because we're not our council, we're not the city council, we're the Board of Adjustment, but there is a very real and dire need. I don't want to sound crass in saying this, but from what I've heard from the Mariners Bay folks and what I've read in the letters and what I've heard in speaking with their condo association, there could be a potential additional Surfside incident that we, like, on our hands that needs to be dealt with. And by that, I mean the specter of this building not meeting a 40-year recert is huge. The specter of this community going bankrupt potentially and 46 families being out on the street, that doesn't just affect them, that affects everyone east of Biscayne. That affects your home values, that affects our community. And more than that, you know, I get the sense of urgency on this. And also, I mean, listen, there's a lot of other great economic benefits and et cetera. What I'm of the opinion of is I do believe that a variance could be allowed on this, but I also want to make sure that it goes before our council for further approval. And I'll just state again why I believe that. I believe that it needs to go through our council so that we can have that robust community discussion, and that also that everything, not just the variance and the height itself, but everything encompassing this project, the urgency, what's going on with Mariners Bay, the economic impact, infrastructure, a lot of items that are not in the purview of this board that need to be decided. The city council is the ultimate arbiter of that and not this board. So I'm not moving just yet. I will, because it's been a long night and I think we've had a discussion, very robust discussion. I will move if we need to, but that's just my personal opinion as somebody who's been not on here for 30 years per se, but
So
has
you're
been here.
adding a caveat to it? I don't know, whatever you're proposing, is it, you're
Well,
adding a limitation?
I think it's up for discussion, or I could just make the motion. And I know that the applicant has some comments on what I just said, but what is important here is if we vote up on this, there needs to be a caveat that it goes before our council for a decision on a very urgent basis, given what's going on with Mariners Bay and everything that was talked about there. I also believe that that's my opinion. I think the appeal may change that. You know, I can't speak to what's going to happen next week, and I can't speak to the legalities of that and how that may affect whatever decision we do here or whether there's an appeal on our decision. But that's my opinion, right? I'm just one board member. But you know, whether we vote up on this needs to go forward to our council for, just as quasi-judicial items used to go before, like that were approved by this board, used to go before our council. That needs to happen again in this case.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Help.
So the deputy city attorney can comment as well, but I don't think you can condition your approval on city council review. I think if you deny it, the application, then there might be an appeal by the applicant, and if you approve it, there'll
Then
be an
it's
appeal
bad.
by a citizen. So
Yeah.
in either event, the city council will review it. You
Okay.
don't need to condition your decision.
And
Well,
in which
I'd love to hear
City-
from.
Fair?
City staff agrees, simply because the LDRs provide for the Board of Adjustment currently. I recall Madam Chair's time, when I first started in the city attorney's office, it was very much an advisory board with mayor and council making the final determination. But because of the current structure of our LDRs, that is your authority, you are the Board of Adjustment, and so I would ask for you to make the decision, and obviously to make that decision based off of staff's recommendation.
Thank you. And given the two situation that you mentioned, because I don't know which would be best for the applicant, you know, if.
We
which-
would certainly prefer a positive approval. so if you
We
meet the
understand.
Criteria.
But what I'm saying is that we can approve and staff and the city appeal, and that takes longer than if if it goes, let's say the board denies and they appeal city council, don't
No,
they get
no.
on?
It'll
Oh.
be the same time
Okay.
period. The-
There is a no win-win.
Okay.
Well, whatever my colleagues decide. Go ahead.
Okay. trying to think the best way to structure this based off of all the comments today. Okay, here's what I'd propose in a motion. I would move in favor of the variance based off of it meeting, in the opinion of this board, 4 of the 6 criteria, conditioned on, 1, that variance affecting this parcel and this applicant in specific, and not any assigns or other folks, and that it goes forward before a city council.
We can't. Isn't that what you said? You
Well,
can.
hold on. That's an opinion, but
Oh,
I mean, that's an opinion, but that's not necessarily something that
okay.
I believe, given that this board used to make decisions that went further for city council approval and discussion, I believe that there's a justification for us to make that caveat and condition. Is there not?
Can I say something?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been deliberately quiet because obviously there's, I agree with Madam Chairperson. There's no win on either side, whether we vote yes or no. But ultimately, we've heard both sides. They've made their case, and now it's time to just get to it and be clear about how we're voting.
Okay.
There's no reason to beat around the bush. Let's hit it. I mean, what are we
Okay.
doing?
I mean, listen, my opinion is to make a motion in favor, conditioned upon council further approval, right? You can make a vote on that. There's no problem in that. And if there's a further appeal on that decision, it is what it is. If you'd like to amend that motion, that we just move up on this and it goes through an appeal again, if we vote in favor, then we certainly could do that. But that's
All right,
my opinion.
So board member Stephen made a motion. Does he have a second? Shields, I'm sorry. Shields, I'm sorry. Shields, does he have a second?
No.
Ms.
All
Montesine?
right.
Fails for lack of second. Next
I'll
motion.
make a motion to approve.
Just approve as
Just
is.
approve as is.
Yes, with staff conditions.
With staff, yes, with staff recommendations, of course.
Conditions, yeah.
Yes.
Is there
Do we have a second? Second for discussion?
What were the staff recommendations again? I'm so sorry.
Staff
That's right,
conditions.
because I
The
think,
conditions?
Yeah, so look, I think it's interesting that we can have conditions from staff. So look, I think we're ready to
I
just
just want to
move
hear it on
on.
the record.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, I don't see any conditions. Are
There
there
weren't.
conditions?
There were
The
The
conditions.
conditions are that the applicant obtains a building permit and all necessary license prior to construction of the building. The applicant adheres to all conditions provided by the Development Review Committee at time of DRC site plan approval, and that the applicant obtains a CU, business tax receipt, certificate of
And the
occupancy.
standard stuff.
Yes.
So I don't see why we couldn't just adopt the condition and move forward.
In the past, let's be very clear, we've adopted conditions upon our opinions in the past that have led to other items that have happened. For instance, we've conditioned that the police department makes regular wellness checks on a particular area that we voted up on. We've made conditions that a variance be allowed on the fencing, but that they follow certain architectural procedures. We've made conditions in the past. I don't understand how a condition that this goes before council before further discussion is not something that's allowed by this board.
Especially when we know it's going to go before the council or anyway.
Regardless,
Yeah.
and I'll be upfront, what I'm trying to do is ensure that this goes before our council.
At whose expense?
But it's going to go before the
It's gonna
council
go
at
before the
the
council anyway.
staff's resources at all times.
They're gonna
That
appeal
that's not going to change that. It's not going to change it. It's going to go before the city council, and city staff is going to have to expend resources to review it.
let's get,
There's a motion that's pending, waiting for
Yeah.
a second.
There is a motion to approve as is, okay? And we all know what will happen. I said it before, there is no win-win. Whether we approve it, at least Mariners people understand that, this is something that will be good for them, and keep your fingers at council approve. But we know that staff is going to appeal, okay? once the decision is made on Tuesday. If it's not a favorable decision, then it will be appealed, and if it is, then they know how to move forward. So, is that correct, Mr. Cook? And our attorney?
I would say as it relates to staff, but that does not preclude the public.
Oh, yeah, the public
Yeah.
also can appeal. Okay. Well, we've all said we like this project, so, hey, I don't know.
I second the motion.
Roll call?
Board Member Jeff Mondesir,
Yes.
Board Member Shields,
Yes.
Chairwoman Rosalind Phillip,
Uh,
all right, Vice Chair
Well,
Michael.
I will,
Wait, she didn't vote
I
yet?
didn't vote yet. I guess I will vote in the majority, hoping that I can control what happens down the road. So that's
So is that a yes?
Yes.
Yes, when you vote in the majority, I can break it back.
Board Member Blythe Perry Lewis,
No.
Board Member Marlene Monistim,
No.
So it's approved 3-2.
To be 3-2.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Mariners.
Thank you.
Listen, group, no matter what happens, it's gonna go to the city council. At least what it looks like, you have, but council has to step up, do their job.
All right. Are we dismissed?
No, hold on. Board
Okay,
people
so
are
more
not
on the
dismissed
agenda?
yet.
The meeting finished?
Old business,
Old
guys? New business?
There's none.
Okay,
Nothing.
again. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. No win-win.